what we're with a lot of self-confidence calling the first episode. You're probably wondering why, you're probably asking yourself, I don't think much of Graham's new ventriloquism act. He could at least be in the same room as the dummy. But the reason my lips are moving and Graham's aren't is because this recording is all about me bombarding Graham with questions. We're going to start with theme of the week. We're going to end with Graham's team of the week. And betwixt the two, he will have at least one question to answer regarding every one of the 10 matches to be played this weekend. Good morning, Graham.
Buenos dias, Pete. From theme to team, it's almost like we're organised. Step right into the weekend, brackets nearly.
Absolutely. Well, theme of the week is referees making small boys cry, which we saw on Saturday. Anyone that was watching Barcelona against Mallorca, in Mallorca, will have seen the tears of Llorens Simonet, 8.5 years old. He's just seen the referee allow a goal with one of Mallorca's defenders, Rayo, on the ground. Then he's seen Morlanes sent off. Then he's seen the pirate Morici sent off. And then he's seen Rafinha not sent off. And he's in floods of tears. Now, me and you sat through the referees on Thursday before the season started.
The big briefing.
Yeah, talking about how they're going to mend their ways. Was this just an indication that things are going to be the same this season?
Look, it's a welcome subject because we didn't prep up what you were going to ask me, but I have to say it drove me mad on Saturday mostly because you have to examine yourself before you look at referee Munuera. And anybody who didn't see the incident, there's a gorgeous, fucking orgasmic pass from Lamine to Rafinha for the first goal. And not that long after, he strikes a left foot shot. Rayo bends into it. And Rayo, albeit that valiant and less so Capetti, but and more so under Pasquale Aguirre maybe than under Arsetti. But the three, now usually two, centre defenders from Mallorca plus Maffeo are dark arts champions. I would say that I've often seen them cheating and lying. Thoroughly good at their job. But when Rayo goes down, is it Munuera's job? And it was quite funny afterwards to hear it was either Arrasate or their lovely midfielder who came from Espanyol, help me out, back to it. Sergi Darder saying, oh, well, now he's a doctor. He could judge from 25 feet whether it was concussive or not. The thing is, these are exactly what you have to, these instincts that Munuera showed are exactly the type of instincts that as a journalist or an amateur referee or a professional referee, you have to excise. Your head is going, well, look who it is. And he's gone down. It's a promising attack. I'm being swindled. Well, whether that was true or not, and in my judgment, although I'm not a big fan of Rayo's outer limits in terms of what he will do to win, Maffeo most particularly, and Costa in their midfield until he leaves. They're footballers who I can see what their value is, but Rayo takes a full-on smack in the head, and we are talking about footballers going into old age or in middle age with advanced signs of dementia. You, in my judgment, I'm doing the same as Munuera did, but he's a highly paid, a $250,000, a minimum €250,000 a year referee who's been told the law, not the interpretation, the law is for potential head injuries, it's a guaranteed stop the game. He doesn't. Barca score. If you look at the way that the ball hits Rayo, your best guess is even though his personality, it's like saying a player you've occasionally seen go down easily in the box, get scythed, and you're like, well, I'm not sure. He's cried wolf before. You're like, it's a fucking wolf this time. Do you know what I mean? That's what happened. It was a wolf. So Munuera made a mistake. I'm sympathetic to him because I think he tried to balance the thing. He made a big mistake and you called this on commentary. At the time, I didn't see it clearly. You called it straight out in commentary, which is a great art. Morici's boot contacts Juan Garcia's face. Morlanes gets sent off. It's his own fault. It's a definite red card. No criticism of Manuera, but Manuera only books the pirate when the boot has gone to his face. Didn't you watch Manuera? Didn't you watch the 2010 World Cup final? What happened to Howard Webb when De Jong's boot went right in at Xabi Alonso's chest, and it becomes the most sinful non-red card in World Cup history? He was like, "Oh, I tell you what, I've annoyed them all. I probably made a mistake." His little voice in the back of his head. And he only yellows in Peter, and VAR, the worst VAR referee in Spain, Figueroa Vasquez, corrects him. When you've been corrected accurately by Figueroa Vasquez, there's trouble afoot. There really is trouble afoot. So it's culminated by the fact that he and Figueroa bottle sending Rafinha off. First view of the tackle, I think, like you and Chappie, who were the commentating duo, you think, "Oh, that's a rash one, that's stupid," but you don't see until you get a new angle the degree to which the scissor tackle is so damaging for the opponent's knee ligaments. He needs to send Rafinha off there. He's had a bad game. He's got a linesman, Martinez, who's the worst in Spain about getting the flag up when there's an offside that's palpable, that you don't need to let play go on. And it was a depressing start to the season. I'm not saying on behalf of Mallorca, because they were cheated. They played with massive spirit. They kept Barca to 2-0 for, until the 94th, 95th minute. But for the standards you talked about, where the referees, they've revolutionised their structure. They put an ex-player, Negredo, and an ex-manager, Manzano, the current Seville president, on the monitoring direction board. I mean, how could that go wrong? A current president. They'll never be accused of bias when referees are sanctioned or awarded particular matches. It's like, lads, not that close, and definitely no cigar in all aspects. I saw Alberola refereed the game, Girona Rayo, so well. He's the number one in Spain.
Yeah.
But as you're hinting, Pete, we need the standards to drip down, and we need referees to referee with common sense, not always looking over their shoulder like, "Oh, how will I be judged?" Do the right fucking thing, said Spike Lee.
Well, little Lorenz, was brought into the Mallorca training ground. They tracked him down, although I presume he didn't need much tracking down as a young mad Mallorca fan. And they took him into the training ground, and he had his shirt signed by all the players, and he had his hair ruffled by the entire squad pretty much. And he went with his little pal, his little bespectacled pal, and his little pal took a bit of paper with his Mallorca 11 on it, and he handed it to Arrasati. And on the Mallorca video, there's a scene at the end where Arrasati says to him, "So you want us to play like this, do you?" And all it was missing really was Chick Murray saying, "Run along, small boys," because it was like, you've had your fun. Come on,
off you go, you small boys.
Quite right too.
Llorens, Mallorca, Arrasati, grief. What football's made of, Pete.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's get into the games coming up this weekend. Then we'll look at the big three teams first. Atletico against Elche. There's an event at the Metropolitano tonight. They've managed to sell 30,000 tickets. The capacity the Spanish football fans have to buy tickets for things where they're not actually going to see any football is unparalleled anywhere. There's no game tonight, but 30,000 of them are going to the Metropolitano. And they're going to present all the signings, 7 new signings. So question, Graham, who is going to have the best first season of those 7 signings?
I don't know, because as we're going to talk about, I think they're badly coached. And therefore, guys who are coming in need to fit into a really organised, clever, consistent plan. And if I'm honest, clever and consistent and organised are now adjectives I wouldn't use of Cholo Simeone's training regime, not just the playing regime. So I'd like to say Hanchko, because he is a good defender, but he's also a defender who organises, he's a defender who leads, he's a defender with a brain. And whether it's 4 or 5 at the back, one of the things that I'm seeing is that the defenders aren't that sure about exactly their positioning, when to press, when not to press, when to bring the ball out, when to lump it long. It's a lot to ask of Hanchko to come in and take over and be the boss. Almeida, the little Argentinian, if you look at his previous career club-wise, you're like, well, why has he played for 3 or 4 different clubs since last year, including MLS? But he's liked enough by the reigning world champions coach to be playing titular, first choice for Argentina. So I'd maybe like it to be him. Baena should be the obvious choice, and maybe that's your answer. And then creativity, boy, do those strikers need it so much. But so many footballers have come into Atleti, found Cholo hard to understand, hard to stomach, hard to get any cariño out of, and therefore, Pete, if I'm brutally honest, I'm worried about the lot of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree with you on Baena, but he's out, isn't he? He's out now until the international break. So
2 weeks at least.
yeah, that's not a great start for him. Cholo Simeone's record before last weekend was never beaten on the first day of the season. So I think it was 7 wins and 6 draws. And obviously that record's gone out the window now. Is he going to move forward this season, or is he going to take another step back?
I don't think it's possible. When I try to put the brakes on my motor mouth as much as I can, but you know where and how we get some of our information about behaviours and standards on the Atleti training ground. And it troubles me massively that Cholo Simeone has been rolling in about 20 mil per year in his bank account for umpteen years. And I see rust. I see him slowing down. It may be involuntary. I see him being superseded by standards. And if I'm honest, I don't think that he's now much beyond a really good man manager motivator, in that once he loves a player, he's charismatic, he's vastly experienced, he's competitive. I don't think he's doing his job all that well. I don't think he has been for a little while. There was a sign of a potential breakthrough last season. And if at 1-0 up against Real Madrid in the second leg, they had been daring and thrilling and front foot pressing, they could have beaten Real Madrid, but they didn't. It's horrendous the way they went out because of the double tap penalty from Julian Alvarez, which has subsequently caused a change in the FIFA rules. However, moving forward, Cholo Simeone and Atleti, you can throw players at a problem. But unless he has a radical upgrading, revitalization, rebirth in terms of how well he coaches, how consistently he coaches, how articulate he coaches, then no. My answer is a straight no. I don't see him moving forward, no.
Well, first home game of the season on Saturday against Elche. I watched Elche against Betis because I think me and you are doing that game this weekend, Elche. And they were impressive. Sarabia has got lots of bright ideas. He wants them to be on the front foot. He wants them winning the ball really high up the pitch. He wants a high defensive line. That's why Betis scored against them in the first goal. But then they get back into it. They're very positive. They've signed Rafa Mir. Let's see how that goes. But they've also signed André Silva. And there's a young player in midfield, Ali Aura, I think is the pronunciation. He can play for Morocco or he can play for Spain. I think he's about 2021, and he looks a real prospect in midfield. And they've got the Austrian defender Affengruber, they had the best defensive record last season in the second division. So it'd be a real test. It's not an ideal first game for Cholo's boys.
You're giving them a talking up because of the three key elements that promoted sides, even if they've been in the division recently, tend to lack. The ability to score, the ability to defend well, even when you've taken a couple of beatings, 3-4 beatings in a row, but you're still defending like hell on all over the pitch, and big teams suddenly find you stuffy and hard to break down, and you can grab a goal. And experience. It's a long course. It's a real marathon run, and a lot of clubs who've come up find the going tough. They're like, wow, at this stage last season, November, March, we had a run where we had 3 opponents who weren't as good as us. We racked up a few points. We racked up some confidence. You don't, as a promoted side, get an awful lot of that in the Primera. So I'm glad that on your first taste of them, you were at least optimistic.
Well, another newly promoted side is Levante, and they got a nice, easy game at the weekend because it's home to Barcelona. We should say happy birthday to Robert Lewandowski, 37 years old. He's looking younger than ever, off the pitch anyway. Let's see how old he looks on the pitch. Who's going to last longer, Graham? Lewandowski is 37 today, or El Comandante Morales, Levante's 38-year-old?
Can I give you a double answer? Who'll live longer in my heart is the Comandante. He is ingenious, entertaining, daring. He's a defier of time at both ends of the scale, because he didn't really turn pro until he was 25, nearly 26. He was a Sparky or a Carpenter or a combination of both, and playing in third division and amateur sides around Madrid where he was born. You're like, what the actual fuck? Because since he became a pro, he's been buoyant and fun. He's got that stoop back. There's a little bit of Di Maria and Comandante, which are the same. They run as if they're hunched over looking for the fiver they've dropped. Yeah, he can do, on form, he can do anything. When he came on in Mendizorroza against Alaves this week, the game was too quick for him. And you learn in our trade, I think, not to make massive conclusions from minor pieces of evidence. So I'm praying that he's going to find his pace, and that Levante, maybe particularly at home, will have enough of the ball to let him dictate play and feed. But in terms of hunger for the game, in terms of physical attributes, in terms of how well he's looked after himself for so long, Lewandowski, I think, will have the longer career, will continue scoring goals probably until he's 40 or more. It's just that he doesn't in any way light my fire. And I think he's at the wrong club too. And he's actually beginning to do a little bit of damage to the way in which Flick wants the team to play. Beautiful numbers, record numbers. If anybody goes into a dressing room and says, show us your medals to Robert Lewandowski, they're going to lose their eyesight. They're going to be dazzled.
Yeah, they're going to be there a long time.
But he hasn't got the joy of the Comandante, Peter.
No. Barca's midfield, there's a bit of overbooking this season. It's complete contrast to last season when they just had Casado and Bernal, and that was the pair. Now Gavi's back, De Jong's back.
You're not going to like this. I am not. I know De Jong has always been a predilection of yours, and the majority of people agree with you. And patently, the most important thing is that De Jong's misses and Hansi Flick agree with you. I can see that he's more reliable, works harder. I don't think he's got winner's attitude. I don't think that he's changed his ability to do the things that he needs to do at all since he joined Barcelona. I think he's been, down and then now stagnant. However, good luck to him. Let him hold down a place at Barcelona for the next 5 years if they think he's good enough and he wants to. The thing that I don't like in this little, the penny shuffle at the arcade where you put your tuppence in and you want to win 62 tuppences that fall over the edges, Marc Casado. If Barcelona, as is being widely briefed, are in the process of trying to offload Marc Casado, it's a disastrous idea. Casado is exceptional. He's one of these players who, the more weight you put on him, the more responsibility that is asked of him, the more experience he gains, the better players that play around him, the more he rises. He strode into the Spain team, and for my taste, in what was, I think, his debut, certainly his full debut, he was man of the match against Switzerland. I think he's a fabulous, fabulous footballer. Bleeds the badge, sweats the badge as well, which has to be an added element, not the basic element. And because of the overbooking, as you rightly called it, and because of the way in which Barcelona need to sell, and you get, just like in PSR in England, you get bonus points for selling one of your kids. You get bonus points because you haven't spent a lot of money on him. You haven't brought him in a big transfer. All that kind of nonsense. It's horrible. I'm not a Barca fan. I just think it's wrong for the way in which football should be constructed at any club. An academy kid comes through, fights his way to the top, shows he's good enough, and then because the numbers don't add up, got to sell you, pal. Horrible, horrible, horrible. And I don't want it to happen, and the overbooking is a danger that either he or Fermin might be punted before this market closes.
Yeah, Catalan papers today full of suggestions that they'll take 30 million for it. Seems absurd. Also today, the Catalan press reporting, which something that you predicted a long, long time ago, that the stadium is not going to be. They're going to miss the September deadline. They're not going to play Champions League football. They're not for certain, but it does seem that they booked Montjuic again. They can't have it actually for the Valencia game because somebody or someone called Post Malone. Do you know who they are? They're
Live
playing
next door, and they've invited me to the gig. So.
All right. Okay. So they can't have it on. I don't think they can have it on the September the 14th. But they've booked Montjuic, which is a signal that they're not gonna. They're gonna miss another deadline.
It's plan B, and you bring it in because you're going bastard. Now, plan A is going. The thing where I'm sympathetic to Football Club Barcelona is like building projects. They never usually drag on. For fuck's sake. Yeah. Building projects are brutal. When I was growing up, I remember Leeds and Chelsea nearly going to the wall because of stadium redevelopment. I mean, when stadium redevelopment leads to Ken Bates taking over, you fucked up. Hello, Ken. You're an arse. Barcelona have been promising that they'll be back in the stadium for over a year now. They were supposed to be kicking off as part of their 25th celebration last November. Didn't happen. Then they were going to be back for the spring. Didn't happen. They were going to have the Gamper tournament against Como, which was played in front of 6,000 people in Johan Cruyff Stadium. Mentioning Johan's going to come up later in this chit chat of ours. And look, get it right. It's a stadium. We adore football. I personally, speaking not for the people who are tuned in, for you, I'll pardon a lot of things in football if I'm watching something that inspires me or thrills me, or if it's my club Aberdeen and it makes me proud and tearful. But safety? No. And I don't think anybody wants building rec 37502 Catalan law from 1992, but they're saying that behind one of the goals there are issues that are not completely sorted, and safety is the primary concern in these issues. And therefore, maybe they get it sorted, but if they get it sorted, let it be because they've fully ticked every box. If they don't get it sorted, it loses the money. It's embarrassing, but in 2, 5, 10 years, people forget that. Camp Nou, whether you're a Barcelona or anti-Barcelona, is an extraordinary place to watch football. The plan for the renovation makes it look a lot prettier than some football stadia that I don't like their modernisation. And you want to be safe and happy when you go to watch there, whether you're an away fan or a home fan or socio, the president, doesn't matter. It needed it done. I remember a Champions League match wading through a huge, like shin-deep puddle of water in the tunnel that links, the pitch to the players' dressing room not that long ago. They really needed to work. They're pitching to be, the whole host the final of the World Cup in 2030. Get the thing right. It is embarrassing. Maybe they play their Champions League football in Camp Nou, but it won't be a capacity of audience that matches what you can get in at Montjuic. I think they screwed up, but it's better that somebody's saying, nah, we do this right.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll take a break now, Graham, because it's time for our first regular feature. Why don't they sing this? You'll enjoy this. This week, we're asking the question, why don't Atletico Madrid supporters sing Carly Simon's 1972 hit, His Friends Are More Than Fond of Robin? It was released on Elektra. It was actually the B-side to You're So Vain. And for those not familiar with the song, this is Carly Simon basically singing about being in love with one of her neighbours, but she can't tell him. So Simon sings, when Robin goes on holiday, there's no one living in our lane. Oh yes, folks still live in our lane, but they're not like Robin. Robin, I've never told you, but I'll be yours until we're old. Please learn to call me in your dreams. The way I'm looking at you is just as it seems. Now, we maybe scrap the second half of that stanza, but I think possibly when Robin is suspended, there's no one in our defence. Yes, we have defenders, but they're not like Robin.
First of all, before we get on to the Norman conquest, did anybody know that on the A side of that, or does everybody know that on the A side of that, Carly Simon is recording, she's hanging around with Mick Jagger. He comes to the recording studios, he asks if he can join in. So Mick Jagger is singing You're So Vain. I bet you think the song is about, he's in the background there. And once you listen to it, you can never unhear it. Mick Jagger and Carly Simon's A side of There's Nobody Quite Like Robin Lenormand. Again, there's a problem I won't repeat, which is I don't think he's being particularly well coached right now. I think massively highly of Robin Lenormand. I've got a debate going. I think it's with Lauren, Arsenal Invincible, who's like, don't you see that when he's on the ball, he's not all that much? And that might be acceptable to say because I don't think he's the most gifted passer. But I was, you and I watched him and commentated on him a lot for Real Sociedad before he came to Atleti.
And you've seen him for Spain.
De La Fuente loved him, nationalised him, which, we should do to lots of industries back home, particularly rail, and make sure NHS never goes private. But he nationalised him from France to Spain. It's legitimate. And I watched his debut game against Italy in the semi-final of the Nations League that Spain went on to win. He was playing quite well. Spain would win a lot. He made a slightly rash tackle, gave away a penalty on his debut against Italy. At that stage, still reigning European champions. And what I loved was, for the rest of that game, he never put a foot wrong. To have that mentality on your debut for a country where you weren't born, you give away a penalty, and you then just play as if it didn't happen. And he played excellently. I would have said man of the match in what became a 2-1 win. I think it was Joselu scoring the winner. And they went on and they won that tournament. He was a rock in that tournament. He was an absolute rock in the Euros that Spain won. I think it hasn't helped him playing for Cholo. Again, that's a firmly held opinion about how Cholo coaches and how he confuses players. But the concussion that he suffered, actually, it's pretty close to a year ago now. It's in early autumn. And Atleti treated it brilliantly. They looked after him. They put his well-being, current and future, first, and they took time to get him back. In my opinion, his self-certainty, his understanding of what he should be doing and what people around him should be doing has been undermined by the whole process of changing clubs, a coach who I don't think is particularly good anymore, and a head injury that kept him out for a long time. So he's been present once he's recovered for club and country, and I don't think he's quite either reached the ultimate level that he was at Real Sociedad in his best moments for Spain. And I think he's a guy who could do with a restart. Not necessarily a change of club, certainly, in my opinion, a change of coach. But I think he needs to shrug off what's happened to him. And he's very much a player like, I see it, I do it. He doesn't overthink things. He's a warrior, an absolute physical warrior. And there's still room for that in sport because increasingly before he got choloed, his brain was working well about, also what should I be doing? So without the best Lenormand, then certainly not only Atleti, I think any team would suffer without the best Robin and Carly. Thank you for seeing into the future.
Perhaps Hansko's arrival brings the best out of Lenormand. I'm with you on that, on Hansko being a good signing. Next game up for us, Oviedo, Real Madrid, the third of the big three. Rodrigo's having a hard time, isn't he? What's going to happen? What's the best solution? He's played one game. He started one game. Xavi Alonso's 7 in charge.
Alonso put a lot of time, immediately took over, and they were going to go and play in the States, into trying to recuperate him. And if I'm not wrong, I haven't looked back, I think that one game was maybe the first Club World Cup game. And the buzz had been Rodrigo's. He's had a boost of confidence. Xavi's arm around his shoulder, the specific words. And they went out there, and I think his ball in is part of, it's Gonzalo who scores in that first game, and Rodrigo's a part of the move, but his overall performance wasn't good. I think the kids and it's hard to understand because he's well put together as a human being. He's a decent lad. He's liked, but he began to feel picked upon. Not I'm bullying by Ancelotti, but he began to feel unfairly treated. He thought that the hierarchy was set, and it probably was and is, and that he wasn't given full credit for work rate, tracking, ability to play right when he'd prefer, as everybody in that front line does. They all want to play left touchline coming in, and that's definitely Rodrigo's best position. He's been capable of scoring wonder goals, also historic, timeless, vastly important goals. Real Madrid need to have, I think, until they've got somebody that controls midfield, they need to have three up front so that somebody is pressing in Xabi Alonso's system. Three up front means you've got to compensate in the middle of the park, which will be better once the fullbacks play like wing backs and it becomes more intelligent bodies in the middle of the pitch until once their movement is coordinated and that everybody's in tune and Bellingham's back. That's all fine. They need a third person up front. You think it's going to be Mastantuono? I think Rodrigo's going to leave. If I'm honest, I think he's going to go to Manchester City, and if he does, then your best guess is that Pep brings him back to life again. Maybe not, but I think that would happen. I don't want to lose him from La Liga football. I loved watching him, and it's a pretty. Do you know it just makes you feel a little bit melancholy that a good player at a young age who's so important is going through this deep trough. I feel sorry for him.
Yeah, we want to see him on the pitch, and as you say, it'd be better if it was La Liga.
Sure.
Oviedo, the Romantics' favourites for this season, and the Romantics' favourite in the team of Romantics' favourites, Santi Cazorla. Has there been a better Spanish player who's never played for any of the big three clubs in Spain?
In comedy series or in films, when somebody is about to do something daring, there's a crash of lightning and they think our maker has intervened. And it'll be like that if I do anything to top down Santi Cazorla, because some sort of Sid Lowe flash of lightning will cut across both our houses. A plague upon both our houses would be sent by Sid. There might be. I think that, unless I'm wrong, David Silva, for example, never played for Barca, Madrid or Atleti. Gasca Mendieta was in the point of joining Real Madrid, but Valencia just put their foot down and said no, hence him going to Lazio. I think that Marcos Senna is in the argument, born in Brazil, but fuck me, what an important footballer he became for Spain in winning the 2008 European Championship. Kept Xabi Alonso on the bench pretty much throughout the tournament, certainly as a starter. And you could go on manufacturing potential arguments, but if your purpose is to say all hail Santi Cazorla, funny, shy, kind, answers his messages on the phone. First time I really bumped into him was at Euro 2008. There was a big welcoming committee in Innsbruck with, the Lederhosen and the Oompa bands, and Sergio Garcia Espanyol and Santi Cazorla were the two last into the squad, and they were standing. They were supposed to be wearing a suit, and the jacket was rumpled, and the tie was up here. It was like a school fucking outing. And one of them was chewing gum. They were standing in this cobbled square in Innsbruck watching the Oompa band and the Lederhosen in top of and Luis Aragonés turned around and growled at him, and Santi went, blushed, absolutely full red. I did a feature with him at Arsenal, whereby he and two other fellas, the Finnish-born English fullback, his name has gone from me, and Diaby, the fantastic midfielder who's always injured. They had to sit down and talk to us, and then we had a record case, one of these old record boxes, and their records had been designed. They were on the cover. They had to look through lots of records and bring it out, and there was a record featuring Santi Cazorla and Wilkinson. What the fullback's name has gone from my mind. And they did that, and they answered our questions, and the record was, the B-roll was the record being put on the turntable, the gramophone. And I remember saying to them at the end, I picked out a record and said, lads, do you know it was a vinyl LP? Do you know what this is? Not one of them had any clue what it was. They just thought it had been a silly old prop. Lovely, lovely man, fabulous, inventive, fun, determined footballer who... good things have come to him because he's a fucking great guy, even beyond being a wonderful footballer.
Let's get stuck into the other 7 games. One question for each game. Betis home to Alaves. Alaves are going for Lucas Boye. Is he Mariano or someone else the answer to them having no Kike Garcia this season?
Kike Garcia was a loss. So smart, so hard-working, target player. Mariano can be. Mariano looks fit and live. He did a big interview sitting, walking around the pitch before last week's victory over Levante, and he sounded ready. He's taken the 9. Boye is talented, but he has never been prolific. Talented and big. What a partnership that could be if they choose to play 2 up front, which I think they will irregularly do.
Mallorca Celta. Celta are trying to sign Denis Suarez. Graham, is there a more melancholic, long-faced, sad-eyed player than Denis Suarez?
You're going to make me break all traditions and try to see both sides. In that he's a pecho frio. I've never enjoyed. He looks like this sort of little prince, little Lord Fauntleroy, who strolls around the patch and is in the pitch and is indignant if somebody gives him a bump or a tackle. And hold on, I'd just like to play it at my pace, please. Will you oiks just? And you're like, oh, for fuck's sake. But he's also the guy who the president at Celta, the father of the current president, Mariano Mourinho, but this Mourinho Senior froze him out for a year because he spoke up on behalf of the agent of a player that Real Madrid nicked from Celta's academy, and Suarez was sent and sat on his arse for a year at Celta by a ruthless president. I thought that was disgusting behaviour. He can play. Nicest touch I think I ever saw was for Barca B against Real Madrid B when he moved from Manchester City for about £1 million. Another was, I think, when Villarreal beat Liverpool in the early days of Klopp, but they were then in, I think, the semi-final of a European trophy, and they were then monstered at Anfield. Suarez overlapping and popping the ball into the middle for the 2-0 goal, 2-1 goal. He can play, but yeah, man, what an odd fella.
Yeah, I interviewed him a few years ago, and he's a nice enough guy, but he's just got the demeanour of someone who wanted to be an architect and ended up on the bins and just feels bad about his lot in life. And you just think, you're a good player. You played for some great clubs. Cheer up, mate. Osasuna Valencia, straight question, Graham. Who's going to finish higher this season out of these 2?
Valencia.
Impressive, no? First day. Well, actually, they weren't that impressive because they only drew, but good summer, kept the big stars or kept their best young players. And
they're well coached. I'm aware that my ESPN colleague Sam Kirkland said, oh, this is the season they're going to go down. I think well coached, still got a good squad. Hurtful who they've lost, but they have signed well. They've got a little bit of a row in Dimitrievski, the keeper who thought he was taking over, but it's going to be Aguirre Sabala. Yeah. I think there's enough. And I think that there's a sense of revitalisation around the fans in the club, and I think Osasuna are much of a muchness.
The question for Real Sociedad Español was going to be, who would win a pub car park fight between JJ Watt and Manolo Gonzalez?
JJ Watt.
That's been vetoed. And we're going to have just how good can MG be? I mean, he's underrated. He's still underrated, but he keeps turning out. He keeps turning over top coaches. He did it to Ancelotti last season. He did it to Diego Simeone the other weekend.
JJ Watt, for those who don't know him, a Houston Texan. He was named in the best NFL defensive men for 3 seasons out of 4 from about 2015 onwards. He's a man mountain, and he is now, with Alan Pace, he's one of the shareholders, as he was, maybe still is, at Burnley. And he came and went on the lash with the fans of Espanyol before the Atleti game, has made a real social impact in terms of suddenly he's an ultra perico. And seems a bit of a dude, in all honesty. He could pick Manolo up and put him in his lunch bag and nick off, and nobody would notice because he's a beast. Manolo, I would be a liar if I tried to pretend that I'm an expert on his pre-career. What you and I'm arguing on your behalf, have seen this season, this and last season. I'm going to pick on 2 specific things. And what goes against him is what big Rodolfo Borré who was a genius of the Barca Academy, and phoned me not long after I moved to Spain to say, I'd with a friend in contact, can you get me in somewhere in Scottish football? Because he said, it's only the Golden Boys who got promoted to the first team at Barcelona. He said, I'm a first team coach. I should be a first team coach. But I'm big and fat and I look scruffy and they'll never promote me. And he went to Manchester City and he said, a golden career there. Very talented man. Didn't fit. And if you remember, who was Martin Jol, went to interview for the assistant post at Manchester United, and Alex Ferguson liked everything about him except his weight, and said, and said publicly, I couldn't hire somebody that fat to be coaching my players. And Jol went on and showed that he's a pretty exceptional football coach, and Spurs fans liked having him there. Manolo does look like a little bit of a bruiser, like a nightclub bouncer. And I think in judgment terms, there are many in the media who are stupid enough to judge the book by its cover. And this time last year, a lot of them were scrabbling around to go, who is he? Show us your medals. What's your background? And his background is relatively raw looking. But he's worked his way up. And the two big things that I think he's shown us is that, one, he really knows how to coach a team into the way you play in what's called transitions now, either transitions against you or when you win the ball and transitions up the pitch. He repeatedly turned out a team that was outgunned in terms of talent, sometimes in terms of pace, in terms of muscle across last season. And one of the things that got them through, and it was the recipe for the winning goal against Real Madrid, albeit that the player who crosses should have been sent off for his foul on Mbappe. But that aside, they can go from one end of the pitch just about as to the other and score or create a chance just about as well as anybody else in La Liga. I think that just picking on two people, El Hilali and Romero, we saw him coach them into being better footballers. We talk about team structure, we talk about team positioning, but individual coaching to make a footballer better is something that Manolo does. And the third thing then that I think is really important is he engenders a spirit. We talk so much about coaching these days that we often ignore or don't know enough about whether a man, women in women's football usually, that leads a squad engenders their loyalty, their inspiration, gets them cohesive because of what they want to do, not just what they're told to do. And Manolo has that in spades. It's a brutal, tiring task being a manager of a Primera side, and therefore I don't know him well enough to know how long his energy lasts, how his standards, whether his standards do or don't dip. But I get the feeling of watching somebody who's like, everything I've worked for, everything I've dreamed of, everything I knew I was capable of but nobody else believed in is coming true, and fuck me, I want to make the most of it. So, well done, Manolo.
Three questions via Real Girona. Feel free to pick one of them. It looks as if Miguel Gutierrez has left Girona, or certainly leaving, and Alex Moreno comes in. So is that a net gain or a net loss? Have you seen Renato Veiga, the Brazilian defender that Villarreal signed, I think from Chelsea? And if Sadik goes from Real Sociedad to Girona and Yangel Herrera goes the other way, is that good for Girona or bad? I don't know what you want to pick out of that.
I want to pick, and I want to make sure I'm not wrong here, so we'll have to be careful. Renato Veiga, the Portuguese international, is that who they've signed? That's the one I want to pick. He's an absolute lunatic.
Right. In a good way or a bad way?
Both. I just turned 22. Yes, I've seen him. I was at his last game of last season because he played in the Nations League final for Roberto Martinez against Spain. Or came on. I've just turned 22. Neither he nor anybody else around him seems to be sure if he's a midfielder, a 10, a fullback, or a centre-back. He signed as a centre-back for Marcelino. And I'm not talking about positional indiscipline. Throughout his career, it's okay, by 22, you've played quite a lot of football. He's played in all these positions. And also, he's one of these footballers who just goes for a wonder. Extravagantly gifted. All the belief in the world packed in between the sides of his cranium. clever and visionary and adventurous and sometimes a brute. I understand why he's carried such a big reputation around him for a long time. What I don't understand is quite why he's never flowered, quite why he's available for what is a bargain price. So maybe it is a slap in the face coming when we watch him this season. But he's in a squad whereby the way because Marcelino's team has been playing anti-Marcelino football since he took over.
Yeah.
They were rigid and clever and formation based. It's like watching the fucking Red Arrows. You're like, oh, them wingtips aren't touching, but nearly enough we go and fucking the crowd oohing and ahhing. Now it's like charge everybody forward, everybody back, and he doesn't seem to care. And that is Renato Vega. It's going to be, listen, Pete, he's going to be fucking fun.
Penultimate game, Athletic Rayo. You covered Rayo's opening game of the season, didn't you? Is De Frutos finally going to become more than just a decent squad player?
I thought he was their best player last season, and if I'm honest, by a distance. I think he's a bit too low, as they like to say here, and therefore maybe he's always thought of himself as more advanced in his career than his coaches think. But last year, I thought he was there was competition for who's the best player, and Rayo fans might be easily saying, "Well, for me it was Batalla, or for me it was still Isi." I don't care. That's fine. They know more than me. But De Frutos was the difference maker. And not just in terms of goals and assists. He stretched teams, and he's a big athlete when his head is in gear. And in this first game, he was man of the match without any question about it at all. But he won't be playing against Gazzaniga every week. Gazzaniga just dropped his shorts and said, have your fun. I've dropped the soap, I've dropped my shorts, just charge right through the big gap there. And he gave Gazzaniga a nightmare evening. De Frutos, it was horrendous to watch if you used to bat the mouse against the elephant, because excuse me, there's the elephant.
Doctor sneezing in.
Then De Frutos took about 10 seconds to work out that Gazzaniga was having an off night, and therefore he just went at him and bullied him and scared him into a red card. And I think he went off with about 15 minutes left, and that was to save him for next game. De Frutos, at the moment, likes his coach, likes the club, is on the rise and feels cocky.
Sevilla against Getafe last game. There'll be lots of time this season to talk about what looks like being a horrendous season for Sevilla. So a Getafe question. Bordalas looks like again lose somebody. Maybe Mayoral, maybe Uchi. Who don't you want to leave out of those two if you're Bordalas?
Yeah, well, neither of them really, because Borja, when he's unleashed, is very, very important, but never fit for Getafe recently. Uche is this bargain basement footballer who can play in just about any position, and everybody's going, well, look at him. This kid can really play, and he's a force of nature. At this stage, if you're giving him or me the unequivocal must choose, you keep Uche.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've promised to start with Team of the Week and end with Team of the Week. So every week, Graham's going to do a Team of the Week based on criteria sent to him approximately 55 minutes before we start recording. There was a bit of confusion because I want this to be topical every week, or not every week, but nearly every week. It isn't topical this week. The first thing that came into my head was a team of Garys, Barrys and Harrys. Now, I sent this through to Graham, and his response was, do you mean a team of nobodies, or do you mean a team of people who are called Gary, Barry or Harry? I mean, what were you proposing? Just people that you know called Gary, Barry or Harry and stick them in 11? Was that what you...
I thought it was a euphemism for players who are like workaday footballers around La Liga. I was giving you credit for advanced thinking, but I am ready to go.
No, yeah. Okay. 11 players, Garys, Barrys and Harrys.
It's 11 players in a team.
Garys.
Well,
if you want, you can do Barrys, Harrys and Garys. You don't have to do Garys, Harrys and Barrys. But...
We're going to start in goals, and the obvious one is Harry Gregg, often referred to as the hero of Munich. He saved the life of Jackie Blanchflower and Bobby Charlton and Dennis Violet, and helped Matt Busby out and two civilian passengers too. Went on to play for a long time for Manchester United, and Harry Gregg founded the famous Harry's chain of bakeries that are now everywhere around the UK. Northern Irishman, died a few years ago, but not that many. Lived to a grand old age. was in that Munich air disaster, survived, and was playing in the first game back that Manchester United performed. At right back, he's joined by, in fact, it's a back four of Gary's.
Okay.
And the right back is one of our Champions League winners, Gary Neville, who is extremely able. Jaap Stam thinks he's very busy. In fact, he branded him and Phil busy knuts. And Gary was kind enough to be the first guest on the big interview. And that was an experience. We talked about Richie Beno. The late Gary Speed has been dropped out of midfield into central defence, which he would have coped with beautifully. Title winner with Leeds, but not a Champions League winner like Gary Cahill, who's always treated me very well. I've always found it intelligent, articulate, loved watching him. And he went from Bolton to Chelsea and in his first season won the Champions League, playing with hamstring injury in that final in Munich at the Allianz Arena. We're behind the goal where the Munich fans had our stadium, our cup, and then it fucking wasn't. And Gary played brilliantly to beat Bayern Munich in an injury-depleted team with a hamstring injury. At the back, the sadly departed Gary Ablett, I think remains unique. The only player to win the FA Cup with both sides of the Merseyside divide, Liverpool and Everton. At our first Portsmouth connection is in wide right midfield, and it is, of course, Harry Redknapp, who none of you will be old enough to remember, but I do remember playing on Match of the Day because I was a big fan of Clyde Best, who he would cross for.
And they were both wingers, yeah?
Harry was, he played wide. I don't think they were called wingers in them days because he was playing just after the era of Alf Ramsey and it was the wingless wonders and midfield of it. But he played wide right, yes. Right-footed player. He was talented. He played with Martin Peters, Bobby Moore, and he's funny as fuck. And he was also a guest on the big interview, at which point his dog Barney barked all the way through, and Harry at one stage went, and he was standing barking, Barney, shut it. And right next to us, and Harry's like, oh, that won't show up in the podcast, will it? Yes. Thanks. One of the all-time legends at Everton, Aston Villa, Gareth Barry, once the all-time leading appearance maker in the Premier League, but overtaken now
2 points for Gareth Barry.
Gareth Barry is in there. Friend of mine and hater of Uri Geller is next to him in midfield. Gary McAllister, another big interview guest, and a man who at Wembley in 1996 was taking a penalty which was destined for the top corner with David Seaman, not showing safe hands, until the magical crystals which Uri Geller had planted at both corner spots and in the penalty spot made the ball roll. As Henry wants to go back and look at just before Gaza scores that really ugly fluke goal where he tips the ball over Colin Hendry's head. Gary Mack had a penalty, and as he's running up to take it, the ball rolls off the penalty spot. And when I was interviewing him in the big interview, Gary, that is, the phone went and he showed me it was Uri Geller phoning him up because he's dogged him throughout his life, and Uri Geller has stayed in touch because Geller, the man who used to bend forks and spoons, look him up. I think he claims he was in Mossad too, so something's gone amiss there. Before the tournament, said he'd planted magic crystals everywhere to help England win. Barry Robson, a friend of mine, and local pub is the same as mine, and when he's at home. Trophy winner for Aberdeen in the League Cup in 2014, I think it was. Scorer in the penalty shootout against Inverness. Barry's currently the Wraith Rovers manager, was the Aberdeen manager. Barry Robson completes my wonderful midfielder. So there's a lot of Garys in there. Gareth Barry is obviously unexpected to you. Harry Yorston is my second Portsmouth connection. Aberdeen born near Pittodrie, scored 141 goals for us, won the league for us in 1955. It was just called the Golden Boy. It was a wonderful footballer that my dad told me all about. Gave up football at 28 because it was more lucrative to be a fish porter down at the harbour. That is getting up at 3 a.m. and carrying boxes of fish from the trawlers to the fish merchants, and that was better for him at 28. A lifestyle that he continued, having done his national service in Portsmouth. A lifestyle he continued till he won 172,000 in the early 70s, an equivalent 2 million nigger. and decided that getting up at 3 a.m. and hauling fish around wasn't very much fun anymore. Harry Yorston is up front for me because he's a Harry. I'm brooking no fucking arguments on that. And then how many's that? Is that 10, Pete?
You're missing a strike.
Yeah, my second striker is Antonio Cassano, who actually was born in Barry and is probably Barry's most famous player. And if in a Grinchy kind of Dennis Suarez way you're not allowing me that, then it's
but you've doubled up with Gareth Barry in my eyes, so I'm giving you Antonio Cassano.
Born in Barry, it's the done thing.
Is there a coach? Please say Barry.
Yeah, and they're all on it, waiting outside for me now, so I've got to go.
So the first Graham Hunter team of the week: Harry's, Gary's, and Barry's. Harry Gregg in goal. Who was right back? Gary Neville, Gary Speed, Gary Cahill, Gary Ablett. Very Gary heavy at the back, but a bit more balanced in midfield. Harry Redknapp, Gareth Barry, Gary McAllister, Barry Robson, and Harry Yorston. What a brilliant story alongside Antonio Cassano, who was born in Barry. Do send in, beautiful subscribers, your suggestions for Graham Hunter's team of the week. Must be a theme, must be criteria that's sent to him 1 hour before kickoff.
2 days, if you possibly can.
That's your lot, Graham. It's almost time to say, as our great friend Simon Hanley used to say at the end of every program, adios amigos.
This has been a Peter Pedro Jensen production.